I'm going to introduce Melinda, who's going to come on and talk about the Sasquatch connection between extraterrestrials and humans. Make her welcome.
Well, thank you everybody for coming along to listen to this presentation today. My name is Melinda. I'm going to be doing the first half of this talk about Sasquatch. I will be focusing mostly on the nuts and bolts stuff initially. So I'll be showing you some video footage of Sasquatch sightings, as well as footprints and vocalizations and observed behaviours of their Sasquatch. From there I'm going to branch out. I'm going to talk about evolution and where the Sasquatch might have come from. And then I'm going to bring it all together in a kind of a big picture assessment for life in the universe. So we'll see how we go with all that. It could be a bit out there, but that's why we're here. I'll go open minds. A lot of the material I'll be presenting today will actually be an extension of a previous talk I did last year on Mars. So it'll be interesting to go through some of that again. So let's get started. First of all, who are the Sasquatch? Are they ETs or are they just animals? You know, a lot of people just think they're cryptids, which means that there's no biological explanation for them. There's a lot of different names for similar creatures, and they're all just big, hairy people. You've probably heard of at least one or two of them. So Sasquatch is a word I prefer to use. It's a Native American term. Bigfoot is the one that they use to describe the North American Sasquatch. Yeti are often talked about in mountainous regions, such as the Himalayas. And in Australia, you've probably heard of the yowie, or the hairy man. So the big question is, do all these terms refer to the same thing? And one thing I have noticed in my research is a tendency for people to just lump all these terms together and just say it's all the same thing. That they're all just talking about one type of creature. And that's a big hairy ape thing. And sadly, I don't think that's true. I think it's pretty much like saying that all people with hair on their heads, they all have to come from Africa. And as ufologists, we recognise that even people that look like us can sometimes come from other planets. You know, people have jumped onto spaceships and seen another person that looks just like them, but they know it's an ET. And the same, I think, goes for the Sasquatch. So let's have a look at some of the different types of Sasquatch and their physical traits. So the North American Bigfoot has been the most cited and has probably got the highest population. There's been several thousand cases reported. They talk about an elusive creature about 6 to 8 foot tall with dark brown or black hair, a solid, robust body, and long arms that hang down to about their knees. And they've got this coned head, sort of like a little peak. And they're usually found in remote forest areas, and they have 5 toes on each foot, just like us. The second type that I've got up there is the ancient ones. Now, these have a round head, they don't have a cone, and they've got very humanoid faces and shorter arms, so they've got proportions like us. Encounters with these kinds of Sasquatch have generally been quite peaceful. They like to communicate with people, especially sensitive people who care about the environment, care about others. Because these people are so much like us and yet not, it's possible that they don't actually live here because they're really encountered in the wild. Now the Himalayan Yeti, it's just a fuzzy picture up there, but it's not white in colour like what is depicted in the movies. It's actually black, and it's very much like the North American Bigfoot, but the thing is it lives in a different environment. It likes the mountain slopes. It can move through the snow really easily, way easier than a person, and it can just go right up these steep slopes, and it seems to live in caves. And most of the sightings of the Yeti are generally footprints. They don't see the creature. Now the one over here, this one's a bit different. The skunk ape. He's said to have an appearance kind of like an orangutan. He's got a very ape-like face, very long arms, and is only about 5 to 7 foot tall, so it's a bit shorter. Skunk apes are only found in a very localized area in Florida's Everglades forests. And their most distinctive feature, as you might be able to guess from their name, is that they smell really bad. The smell is said to be like a wet dog and a skunk crossed together, so you wouldn't want to run into one. Now, they're a little bit different. They have 4 long toes on each foot. That's what the footprints look like when I'll show you some of them later. Now, lastly, the yowie, this one here. So this is the one that's native to Australia. Quite variable in height, from 6 to 10 foot tall, and often described as having reddish brown hair. Lives in forests in places quite close to here, in fact, Springbok and Gympie. So you never know. If you go out to those places, you might run into one. Now, sightings are rare, but they have featured in Aboriginal lore since ancient times. And the Indigenous people feared the yowie because he was always aggressive towards them. And they thought he was a cannibal, which could be true. And they were often depicted as having claws on their hands and feet, but some of them say that he doesn't have much hair on his face, but he has a very flat, wide nose like an ape. Now, there's more than one type of yowie. There's a second type. This was Cheryl that told me about this one, and I went and researched it. Okay, it's a smaller one. It's only about 4 to 5 foot tall, and it's got a different name. It's called a Jirawera. I don't have a picture up, but I'll just tell you about it. It's very ape-like, has a pushed-in nose, and is also quite aggressive, but it's smaller. So just from those descriptions, we can see that the Sasquatch have a lot of variability, and they vary from region to region. We don't see the same thing in each country. And I don't think people are just making this stuff up. Now, just to illustrate my point about the Yeti footprints, this was a very recent sighting. This was from 30th of April, just this year. All they found was some footprints, but they were very large. They said they were 81 centimetres long and 38 centimetres wide. I think that's been a bit distorted by the snow. You can actually see the pictures there. But yeah, that's definitely a lot bigger than a person's foot. And this is some pictures of the people that found the footprints. I think these lines here, I think these are vehicle tracks, and these ones going across are the Yeti footprints. You can sort of see a heel and a toe, can't you? So they do look like footprints. Yeah, and this is the what are they? The people, yeah. the mountaineers from the Indian Army. Yeah, they've got their big banner in the background. Yeah, so this was military. They found them. So I'm going to show you some pictures of the best historical footage that we have of Sasquatch so far. Now, most of these videos are of the North American Bigfoot because, as I said, they seem to be the most, there's the most numbers of them. And I don't think these videos are hoaxes, but if you have a look at them and you decide whether you think they're made up or not. So let's start. This one's very short. I might have to play it a few times. This is a very famous one. This is the Patterson-Gimlin footage from 1967. This video has been stabilised. It's had a lot of work. Originally it was a lot shakier. I think, was it in black and white originally?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
No, I think it was in that colour though.
Yeah, might have been made in colour. Anyway, what you can see is that the Sasquatch is a female because she turns around and you can tell. Okay, I'll play it again and maybe you can tell why she's female. She turns around just here and you can see that she's got breasts. Anyway, she has a very robust body, but it's not an overweight person in a gorilla suit. She moves very fluidly and easily, and you can tell by the swing of her arms that she's just easily walking along, long strides, and you can also see the cone-shaped head that she's got, which I told you about earlier. Next one. Okay, so this next video is more recent. So the last one was 1967. This one's 2013, and it's been dubbed the Independence Day footage. So this one's also a female, and she's carrying a baby. Let's play this one. It takes a minute to pop out. See that there? She's picked up something from behind the rock. See how she's got exactly the same body shape as Patty? There's just some slow frames here. She's got that cone-shaped head. And very elusive. She's trying to hide. She's very worried about that camera. She doesn't want to be seen. Interesting. So that one was taken 36 years later than the previous, and yet the Sasquatch looks pretty much identical. So I'm going to talk about the behaviour of Sasquatch. So this is off a site called sasquatchresearchers.org. So we know quite a lot about the North American Bigfoot, but we don't know as much about the other types because they're very rarely seen. Now the Sasquatch are more active at night, with most sightings occurring at dawn or dusk, and it's possible that they have been forced into this activity cycle because they don't want to be seen by people, by humans. And they seem to live mostly in caves, and I'm going to tell you a little story about that later on. They live in family groups, and they're very much like us. They have adults and they have babies, and they have teenagers that live with them for a long time, until they're almost as big as their parents. And they can sense where someone enters the area with ill intent. If someone is hunting them with a gun, they can sense it telepathically, and they will become very aggressive and they'll try and chase them out. They're very territorial. They'll get very angry. They'll emit this odor, and people that come and try and approach the Sasquatch peacefully have a very different experience. So obviously they don't want to be hunted. Despite their large size, Sasquatch move very fast, and they can even keep pace with cars. They are adept at hiding in the forest. It is said that they are so in tune with nature, get this, that they can shift their vibrational frequency to become invisible. And that could be one of the reasons why nobody's ever managed to catch one, hunt one. And this is a skill that the little Sasquatch are taught to evade people. And it's just like we would send our kids to school. They teach their young ones to become invisible. They are playful and mischievous, and they have been known to toy with people that they're friends with. So they might play pranks on them, such as throw sticks or rocks at them. Sometimes when they're invisible, they've been known to pat people on the head. they're very funny, yeah. Well, I haven't met one myself, but this is what I've heard. They have been known to push over whole trees to scare people that are in their territory there, that they don't want there. They push over trees. Can you imagine how strong you would have to be to push over a tree? They can also uproot trees and then stick them back down in the ground upside down to mark their territory. And they've been known to build structures with trees. So this one here is an X. So that has possibly been made by a Sasquatch, and this one down here is more like a star. But can you think of any other purpose these structures would serve other than markers? You wouldn't really get much shelter out of that. Sasquatch have a curiosity for human technology because they don't use any technology themselves. So they are very interested in things that we have, like cameras, phones, and musical devices. Sometimes they pull them apart and remove the batteries. Sometimes they even take their own pictures. So up here, this was a photo that Tim gave me. It's apparently a selfie taken by a Sasquatch. Look at that picture. If you look at it, would you call this a human face or an ape face? Because you probably say, oh, that's an ape. But then you look at around the eyes here. See how that's white? And then you look at the apes that we have, the only time you actually see the whites of the eyes, see this guy who's sort of looking sideways? That's the only time you see the whites of their eyes. Whereas in a person, you see them all the time, and that's supposed to help with communication. So this guy here, he's got human eyes and yet an ape face. So very interesting. Sasquatch have been known to interact peacefully with kind people, and they've accepted offerings of food such as apples and dried fish. They have a wide range of vocalizations such as whoops or screams. I'm going to play some of them for you later. But they can't speak clearly like us. They don't seem to have the right apparatus to actually speak clearly. But they can imitate other woodland creatures. And they communicate with humans mostly through telepathy. And some of them can even write messages to us. This next one, this is a message that was written by a Sasquatch and given to this guy, Kawani Lasvaratus. He's a Sasquatch communicator. It's a very interesting message. I'll read it out. Some say men want to kill us. We are people, not Elohim, not Nephilim, not evil spirit. We are first people, seed of Adam, not of Cain. Learn good the old ways. Time is short. Soon come last war. We will all be safe in the woods. Wow. What do you make of that?
Very profound.
Profound, isn't it?
Yes.
There's a lot of meaning in there. There's some biblical references. Seed of Adam. It's from the Bible. Learn good the old ways. What do you think that means?
How would they know about the Bible?
Exactly. We'll talk about it. Well, what I think learn good the old ways means is stay close to nature. I'm going to talk about that. Clearly the Sasquatch have intelligence and they have a lot of wisdom that they would like to share with us, but they don't have technology. They are people of the forest. So next I'm going to play you a couple of clips of Sasquatch vocalizations. So that guy, he left his video camera in the woods to just try and record some deer. He didn't expect to get that. He wasn't actually looking for Sasquatch. And if you just heard that, you might think, oh, that could be a moose, could be some kind of animal, whatever. Okay, but that's not the only one I've got. That's him laughing. But you can see how it's very similar to the previous one, isn't it? It's not a sound like we would make, but he's trying to communicate something, isn't he?
Yeah.
Maybe to the other Sasquatch around him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely something there. One of the main forms of evidence submitted for the existence of Sasquatch is some footprints. I just wanted to show you a few. That top one up there, this was the one that they think is from a skunk ape. If you look at it, it's got like this kind of a protrusion out here, and then it's got at least three. Maybe this is another one here, another toe, but they're very long toes. They're much more like an ape or a monkey. And then if you look at these other ones, okay, so this is the one that they're saying is a Bigfoot. So if you can look at the size compared to a normal human's foot. It's very, very long. It's also very rectangular, and we've got these 5 little short toes, much like ours. And then here's another one. You can see the similarity between these two. We've got one big toe, a little. They're all the same. Does everyone agree that these look very similar? But they're not like our feet, because this is our feet here, and these are the footprints that we would make. And here's a gorilla foot. This is like an opposable thumb, like we have on our hands, but they have them on their feet. Yeah, and here we have Patty from the first video I showed you, and you look at her foot, which looks exactly like one of these. It's like a big paddle. Okay, so this is the story I was going to share about the caves. This suggests that the military is likely very aware that we have Sasquatch here on Earth, and they want to keep them a secret, possibly for their own protection. So I'm going to read this out. On May 18th, 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted, which killed more than 4 people as well as thousands of animals. The United States Army Corps of Engineers were sent to recover Bigfoot bodies from the eruption site. All of the guardsmen were told to keep quiet about the operation, and this story did not surface until recently, 2012. So the cleanup crew was briefed in a tent that was guarded by some armed soldiers that weren't from the Army Corps. So that kind of tells you right there that there's something a little bit secretive going on. A civilian entered the tent, followed by a large Bigfoot creature, which had some burns and a bandage on its arm. It looked very sad and somber. The civilian, who was possibly an ET, and the Bigfoot spoke in a very weird language. So maybe they made some of those weird sounds that we were listening to before. Maybe not that loud though. The group got into a truck and went to 5 different cave sites. The Bigfoot would call into each cave and await a response. Sometimes there was none, at which time the Bigfoot would look very sad because all his friends and family had died that were living in that cave. The civilian would touch his shoulder and offer his canteen to give the creature a drink. At another cave there was a response, and the soldiers went in and emerged carrying a badly burned Bigfoot. The first Bigfoot spent 5 minutes with the creature before quietly whispering to his civilian friend and leaving. Sadly, the soldiers were asked to put the burned one out of its misery by shooting it. At the last cave, another Bigfoot was recovered with a badly burned leg. He was placed on a large stretcher and taken back to the truck. As the mission concluded, the Bigfoot waved at the soldiers, which was interpreted as a thank you for all that they had done. So from that story, we can conclude that there is possibly a cover-up from the military, that they know about these guys and they're just pretending. Just like with the UFOs, they're just pretending that they don't know anything, but actually they do. But luckily in this case, which was really nice, they acted with compassion. So what is the connection between Sasquatch and UFOs? I would like to point out that most ETs that are encountered, they seem to look mostly like us. They're about bipedal. Does this mean that most intelligent species have 2 arms, 2 legs and a head? It seems to be the trend that we're seeing. Are they interested in us and coming to Earth because we are most similar to them? So we've got the greys, the reptilians, mantids, Nordics, felines, and then we have the Sasquatch, if Roy is correct, is also an ET. Now the Sasquatch, there are many different varieties, and I don't think we should be looking for a single answer as to where did they come from. In my view, some of them could have evolved on Earth and others might have come from elsewhere. Just because it's a big hairy creature doesn't mean all of them came from the same place. You know, just like humans don't all come from the same place. Now, I'm going to talk briefly about this. If you remember the talk I did on Mars, I'm going to bring up some of that material again because this is relevant to what I want to talk about. So the aliens that abducted Alec told him that there used to be a planet in between Mars and Jupiter which they called Kuiper. Sadly, the planet was destroyed and is now an asteroid belt. When Kuiper was a planet, it orbited around the sun in a slightly elliptical manner, and it was predominantly a water planet, smaller but not unlike Earth. And the water was mostly frozen because it was further from the sun. Now, when the planet was closest to the sun in orbit, Kuiper was quite conducive to life. That means lots of life on the planet. But when it was further from the sun, it became very cold and the life forms had to find a way to survive. How would you survive if the planet became very cold? Grow here, that's one way. Or you could go underground. Now these are different strategies that these life forms decided to take. Now some of them went underground and they liked it so much that they built these big bases and they just decided to stay under there the whole time no matter where their planet was. And the others decided to go stay on the surface and grow all this hair and adapt and survive. So this is all sounding pretty familiar to some creatures that we've encountered. So here we have the greys. Don't know if this photo is real, but it illustrates the point. And our Sasquatch friends. As you might expect, it was the underground greys that destroyed their planet Kyber with their technology. And when they did that, they actually had some time. They realised they'd mucked up, and they had some time to rescue all the, well, not all of them, but some of the life forms that they had on their planet, and they brought them initially to Mars. So that's why this was in my Mars talk. But Mars was also dying, and so they decided to come to Earth. I'm just going to go briefly through a couple of sightings. This is the Oscar Zamora sighting from 1981. He was hiking through a remote area of the Andes Mountains, and he describes a Bigfoot climbing up a metal ladder into a spaceship. And then the spaceship hovered off the ground, flashing lots of bright lights, and then it just took off. So this peaceful creature of the forest, for some reason, is traveling in a spaceship. This is very strange. We haven't figured it all out yet. Here's another one. Mount Vernon, Missouri, 1983. Ron and Paula Watson watched through binoculars a landed craft with two small humanoids bringing a paralyzed cow inside. Next to the landed craft stood a lizard man on this side and a Sasquatch or Bigfoot here on the other side. Now, why would all these different alien entities be watching or helping with these animal mutilations? It's just what was observed to here. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this idealized progression. So what we're looking at is these little, these are just apes, like similar to a chimpanzee, and progresses into a more upright form, and you can see that the hair is disappearing, which is really amazing that they can come to that conclusion when actually all they've got is some fossilized bones. Yeah, so I find that very interesting. It's like they're trying to just go from here to here, but they're not quite sure, so they'll just draw in these things that kind of look like intermediate forms, and it's very strange. But this is what science wants us to do. They want us to believe that. But actually, when you start digging a bit deeper, it doesn't quite make sense. What actually we have is a picture that looks more like this. We've got different shaped skulls, and they're all different sizes, and they're trying to draw these little dots. They're not quite sure how they're connected. And then when you look over here, we've got different size heads. This guy's very tall. This guy has a much larger brain than us. This is the Homo sapiens here, and this is the Neanderthals. And they've actually got a larger brain, so they could have actually been smarter than us. And then you get these little guys who are probably not quite as intelligent, but they have more hair, so they must be more primitive. If you compare monkeys and great apes, you'll find that monkeys generally walk on all fours, and they have a long tail. Great apes, on the other hand, they have larger brains and no tail. They have very long arms, but do they actually walk upright? Do great apes walk upright? No, not in only for a temporary amount of time. That's not actually their normal form. They would rather be on all fours or climbing trees. So often you see pictures like this of great apes and a human next to each other, but these great apes are upright when actually they're not upright at all, and they're just trying to show us that they're similar. So I don't think this is right. Another thing is that they say that we have so much DNA in common with these, but actually we have 97.5% DNA in common with mice. And we don't look like a mouse, so I don't think that really means a lot. We also have 50% with bananas. Yeah, so scientists are good at trying to deceive us. So let's have a look at our Sasquatch in comparison to an upright gorilla. This is the Sasquatch over here from the video I showed you earlier, and this is an upright gorilla. So what are the differences and what are the similarities? So we can see that both of them have the sagittal, so you can see it up here, this cone head, which is actually called a sagittal crest. And you can see it here. It's usually in gorillas, it's usually in males, and they think what the purpose is to anchor their jaws because they have to eat very fibrous food, and it gives them very strong jaw muscles. So you can kind of guess what the diet of a Sasquatch is. I think they do eat meat as well. They might be omnivores. A And the other thing about a gorilla is you look at his proportions. He's got very short legs and a very kind of long body with a big chest. And then you look at Patty over here. She's much more in proportion. She's got legs that are quite long. Her arms are quite long as well, but her body is not as long as this gorilla here. And then you see this man in a gorilla suit. What do you notice about a person compared to Patty? What's the difference?
Proportions.
Proportions? Yes, and also the body of a human is what they call gracile. It's very light framed. We don't have as much muscle as an ape that lives in the forest. It's like we were born weak. So, what I think is a more realistic evolution, if you were to go from an ape into a more upright hominoid, you would get something that probably looks more like a Sasquatch. This to me is a realistic evolution, whereas the one where we're all losing our hair for no apparent reason, I think that's just a fallacy. Now, Gigantopithecus. Now, anyone who's done any reading about Sasquatch will often hear this, because one of the big theories is that the Sasquatch evolved from Gigantopithecus. And just like all those other pictures I was showing you, he doesn't actually walk upright, but he's just drawn that way or depicted in that way to make him look bigger and to make him look more like a person. But actually he lived on all fours. We have this cycle of evolution on Earth, going from very simple forms to more complex forms, and then we finally get to humans. And what we see is an evolution of many legs to, like here, like with the trilobite and the microorganism, and we gradually go into 4 legs to 2 legs. And then as we go through evolution, the Sasquatch, he starts to develop powers such as becoming invisible. And so I would say this is a more advanced version of a person. And the cycle, as I see it, is that you go from an interdimensional species to an energy being, and then gradually what I would call the source. This is a big topic. I'm just going to skip over it very briefly here. Yeah, this is important. What we see in nature is a cyclic plan. You see death and rebirth, and it's all this big cycle. Whereas what we see in ETs is a linear development. So we have things like cloning, genetic modification, robotic parts. So this is what we see with the ETs, is that they're starting off in a natural form and they're becoming what I would just call a husk. Okay, so the reason is that they're just basically a photocopy of themselves. They're trying to extend their lives rather than be part of nature. They just want to become immortal. So we've got 2 pathways. We've got the Sasquatch going up the spiritual pathway, the natural pathway, and then we have the ETs going down this linear pathway. They're trying to extend their lives. And how is all this connected? This was from an alien abduction, and the ET, who is a hybrid, said that she hadn't been able to carry a baby for hundreds of thousands of years because of the way their technology had developed. Okay, so the reason why the Sasquatch are involved with cattle mutilations, my theory is that some of the Sasquatch and the ETs, the grey ETs, are working together because they evolved together on the same planet, such as Mars, so there's an allegiance. And the Sasquatch are helping the grey ETs to get back. Remember that picture I showed you with the 2 pathways? They're trying to get back to the point where we're at now, because we're at that crossroads where we could become part of nature, or we could just go along this technological path where there's not really a return. So what they're trying to do with these mutilations is gather genetic material so they can help bring these grey ETs back to where we are now. And I think what has happened is that we are actually hybrids, and we have been placed here to help farm material for other species. Anyway, that's food for thought.